I was awake when they sealed me inside the sarcophagus. I remember the moment they lowered the lid. The chamber was silent, ritually silent, the kind of silence that feels constructed rather than accidental, as if the universe itself had been ordered to hold its breath. Beneath that manufactured stillness, I could hear only two things: the grinding of ancient servos lowering the adamantium door of the sarcophagus, and my own heartbeat, thundering in my skull like the footsteps of a giant trying to escape. The custodians of my chapter stood in formation around me. Their armor was impeccable, polished to the luster of a funerary relic. Their helmets were sealed, but I knew every one of them was watching me with the same mixture of reverence and dread. You see, we Astartes are trained never to fear death. But this was not death. This was something infinitely worse. When the lid began to close, I felt my breath hitch, a pathetic human reflex I had not experienced since youth. I tried to lift my arm, to gesture, to protest, anything to remind myself that I was still alive, still a warrior, still myself. But nothing moved. Half my body was gone, replaced with nutrient tubes, electrospinal couplings, and the cold, choking harness of life support coils drilled directly into my flesh. My mind screamed, but my voice refused to obey. The apothecaries had already silenced my larynx. They did not want my last organic sound to be a plea. Not when they called this an honor. Not when they needed me to live on. When the sarcophagus lid finally slammed shut, the sound did not echo outward. It echoed inward, trapped in the small, dark space with me, repeating until it became the sound of my own coffin ceiling. The darkness that followed was total. Not metaphorical, not poetic, total. It pressed against me like a physical presence, a weight, a second skin, a shadow that smothered thought. I had fought demons on the burning plains of Sithora. I had walked through the warp storms of Jural Prime. I had held the line for 18 hours while the sky itself peeled open. But nothing had prepared me for being conscious inside a closed sarcophagus. It felt wrong, not frightening, wrong, as if human consciousness is not meant to exist without a body to anchor it. My nerves tried to fire, my muscles tried to move, my mouth tried to scream, but the machine had already begun its work. The first thing it took from me was my sense of breath. The second was my sense of heartbeat. The life support system overrode both functions, replacing organic rhythm with mechanical cadence. My lungs did not inhale. They were inhaled. My heart did not beat. It was pulsed. That was the moment I understood. I was no longer in control of my own life. The sarcophagus was. A faint light flickered at the edge of my vision. I thought it was a lumen strip inside the coffin, but it wasn't. It was a neural signal, my first direct communication link from the Dreadnought's machine spirit. It wasn't a voice. It wasn't a thought. It was presence. Imagine a creature made entirely of instinct. Imagine it pushing against your mind like a beast sniffing at its prey through a crack in the door. That was the machine spirit. Ancient, half feral, half sacred, entirely alien. The tech marines claim they tame these spirits. They claim the rites and oils and blessings pacify them. But they do not pacify anything. They merely distract the spirit long enough to slide another dying hero inside its throat. The presence pressed harder. It was not curious. It was hungry. And in that first moment, inside that dark, suffocating coffin, I realized the spirit was not angry or hostile or malicious. It was indifferent. Indifference is the cruelest evil of all. A voice pierced the static of my fear. "Cold, brother Arcturian," said the master of the forge, his tone cold and official, echoing through the internal vox. You will feel disorientation as your neural ports synchronize. Do not resist. I tried to answer, to speak, to demand clarity, to tell him that I was still myself. But the machine did not allow sound. It did not allow movement. It did not allow anything except submission. I felt a crackling sensation at the base of my skull, like ice-cold lightning crawling through my spinal column. It burned without heat. It froze without cold. The neural ports activating. An Astartes body is built to withstand agony, but there are some sensations, specific, surgical, clinical, that cut deeper than pain, that strike at the very concept of self. This was one of them. As the connection deepened, I felt memories slipping, not erased, but pushed aside. Not lost, but archived. The machine spirit was making room for itself. A sudden jolt of light exploded behind my eyelids. I flinched, internally, mentally, but the machine did not flinch with me. Instead, the Dreadnought's vision systems powered up. A panoramic view of the reliquary hangar filled my mind. Not through my eyes. I no longer had eyes. The Dreadnought had eyes. And now, I was seeing through them. The world looked wrong. Hyper-real, hyper-sharp, each detail rendered with the cold precision of a machine that does not understand what beauty is. Every cog, every skull, every scrap of incense smoke drifting in the air was captured and displayed in perfect clarity. No depth, no warmth, no life, only data. I was no longer a man inside a machine. I was a man inside vision too vast for a man to bear. I tried again to move, not my arms, not my legs. My mind tried to move my old muscles, but there were none left to obey. But then, something moved. The Dreadnought's arm, a colossal limb of adamantium and ceramite, twitched, not fully, not intentionally, just a tremor. But it was enough. The chapter fell silent. The Tech Marines ceased their chanting. The Princeps legate stepped forward, whispering, "He lives," someone whispered. No, I did not live. I endured. The sarcophagus was not letting me speak, but it let me hear everything. Every prayer, every muttered word, every fearful breath from the serfs who would maintain me for centuries to come. "Official, begin final seal," the Forge Master ordered. With a hiss of pressurized incense and sanctified coolant, the sarcophagus locked. Not like a door, like a sentence. With each clamp, each latch, each sacred bolt hammered into place, I felt something inside me slipping further away, as though the machine was pushing me deeper, deeper, deeper into a corner of my own consciousness. Trapped, fading, becoming small. The Master of the Forge spoke again. Solemn, Brother Arcturian, you are now one with the engine, one with the chapter. You will awaken only when needed, only when needed, only when war demands it, only when the galaxy screams for more death. Only then will they open their coffin and let the dead man walk. The machine spirit surged forward, enveloping my senses with its cold, observing awareness. It did not speak. It did not think. It simply occupied. And as it settled into the corners of my mind, like a beast curling around its nest, I felt something else. The first flicker of its emotion. Not hatred, not hunger, not instinct, but disappointment. The Dreadnought machine spirit wanted a warrior who had accepted his fate. I had not. I never would. The lid of the sarcophagus was now sealed. My vision was now the machine's vision. My heartbeat was now the machine's pulse. My breath was now the machine's rhythm. And yet, my terror was still my own. There, in the darkness behind the Dreadnought's waking sensors, in the tiny crack where my human consciousness had been shoved, a single truth crystallized. This was not preservation. This was captivity. And for the first time since I became an Astartes, I finally understood what it meant to fear. I did not dream inside the sarcophagus. I only waited. How long I slept, I cannot say. Time inside the sarcophagus is not time at all. There is no breath to measure it, no heartbeat to feel it, no body to sense it. There is only drift, a slow sinking of consciousness into a mechanical abyss, where thoughts no longer move in lines, but in circles. I existed in a place between sleep and death, a state so still it felt like the galaxy itself had abandoned me. I do not know how long I remained in that limbo, but I know the moment it ended. It began with a whisper, not a sound, an intention, not a voice, an intrusion. The machine spirit stirred. Imagine being submerged in an ocean of oil, motionless, breathless, empty. Then imagine a hand pressing against the surface above you, not touching, not breaking through, just disturbing the layer between you and awareness. That was the sensation. At first, I tried to ignore it. A pathetic instinct, like trying to roll over in a bed you no longer possess. But the presence grew, watching, waiting, expecting. Something outside the sarcophagus was happening, something terrible. The machine spirit pushed harder. Awaken. The command wasn't spoken, it was imposed. Light slammed into my vision, white, blinding, agonizing. My systems booted with a violence that felt like being torn from a grave. Every sensor flared. Every relay screamed. Every data node surged. This was not a gentle awakening. It was a drag upward, like claws pulling me from a pit. The hangar's interior appeared in a fractured mosaic. Flashing hazard lights, sprinting serfs, tech marines shouting orders, emergency banners unfurling, the stink of burning metal, the keening of warning klaxons, and beneath it all, the tremor of distant artillery. War. That was the only thing that justified waking the dead. Static choked the vox. Then a familiar voice punched through. "Dreadnought Arcturian, respond!" I tried. "Emperor," I tried. But speech in this form is not breath and words. It is cognition forced into vox modulation. The first attempt came out as a guttural metallic snarl. The second was worse. The tech marines exchanged wary looks. "His spirit core is unstable," one muttered. "His human mind is resisting," said another. "Push the integration," ordered the forge master. Push the integration. The worst words I could have heard. A sharp crack detonated inside my skull. Not sound, but neural current. A spike of cold electricity drove like a spear through the back of my consciousness, pinning me to the machine spirit's awareness. It expanded, filling me, surrounding me, smothering me with its void calm hunger. And for the first time since entombment, I felt its mood clearly. It resented being woken. A great beast dragged from slumber, forced to fight, forced to obey. It wanted to rampage. It wanted release. It wanted violence to justify its suffering. And it wanted me to let go so it could take control. The Forge Master's voice cut through the rising psychic pressure. "Arcturian, the chapter needs you. Enemy forces breach the outer lines. You must awaken fully." War. Duty. The reason I still existed. I forced myself to speak through the machine. "I hear you." The Dreadnought's vox warble twisted the words into something colder, inhuman, but they understood. The serfs scattered. The tech marines retreated to safety. The clamps locking my titanic form into its ritual cradle disengaged one by one. Thunk, thunk, thunk. Each release sounded like a hammer blow against the inside of my coffin. The sarcophagus vibrated. The machine spirit trembled with anticipation. And then, the final lock disengaged. Gravity hit me like an orbital strike. My body, my new body, crashed onto its knees. The impact shook the entire hangar. A ripple of shock waves rolled outward, knocking incense sensors from their chains and scattering tools across the deck. The floor groaned beneath my weight. The Dreadnought was awake. I was awake. But neither of us was fully in control. "Stand," ordered the Forge Master. If only it were so simple. The Dreadnought's legs reacted first, not to obey, but to test their strength. A grotesque twitch, then another, then a heaving rise as the massive limbs straightened, servos screaming, pistons hammering, stabilizers recalibrating. My awareness lagged half a second behind the movement, a delay that felt like trying to inhabit the body of a giant one heartbeat too late. I could feel the machine's spirit pushing. Yield control, yield control, yield control. No, not yet. The hangar gates opened, revealing the outside sky, thick with smoke, streaked with falling debris, illuminated by the orange glow of distant explosions. And then I heard it. The thunder of enemy war engines approaching, the crack of last fire, the screams of the dying, the roar of something colossal moving across the battlefield. War had come to our fortress. "Dreadnought Arcturian," the Forge Master said. "You will deploy immediately. Follow the beacon to defensive line Gamma." I tried to move. The Dreadnought surged forward. Not a walk, not a step, a lunge. My titanic foot slammed onto the hangar floor, leaving a cratered indentation. The next step was smoother, and the next. Slowly, consciousness and body began to align, though the machine's spirit still moved faster, hungrier, more eagerly than I did. Every motion felt like guiding a meteor with my fingertips. Barely contained, barely controlled, always threatening to veer into devastation. As I crossed the threshold of the hangar, I witnessed the battlefield for the first time through Dreadnought vision. A sea of bodies, some enemy, some ours. The eastern wall breached, turrets in ruins, sisters of battle regrouping under fire, a burning rhino crashing into a trench, a colossal silhouette in the smoke, something monstrous. The ground quaked, the air reeked of ozone and blood. The sky was a churn of screaming aircraft. And all around me mortals stared as I emerged, not as a hero resurrected, but as a walking tomb. A planetary defense officer stumbled backward, whispering, "By the throne, the Dreadnought walks." If only he knew what walked inside it. I reached the outer wall in 7 strides, each one shaking the earth beneath me. With every moment, the integration deepened. The machine spirit wrapped itself around my thoughts like a cold hand around a throat. Kill, advance, kill, advance, kill. I fought it. Not because killing the enemy was wrong, but because giving in meant losing myself. At the breach, I encountered the first wave. Xenos, warped, chitinous, multi-limbed horrors, crawling through the shattered fortifications. Their screeching pierced even the Dreadnought audio filters. Acid spit hissed across the ground. A tyrannid swarm, the kind that blots out cities, the kind that leaves only bones behind. "Arcturian!" A captain's voice cut through the vox. "Hold that breach or the fortress falls!" My heavy flamer roared to life. Automatic, instinctive, almost eager. Liquid fire vomited across the swarm, turning the first wave into shrieking silhouettes of melting flesh. The smell hit my filters like a hammer. The machine spirit surged with delight. Burn. I gritted my mental teeth. "I am still here," I hissed inside the neural link. The machine spirit's response was a ripple of static, almost amusement. The second wave hit. Claws the size of swords raked across my armor. A monstrous warrior leech leapt onto my sarcophagus, its talons scraping the runes carved into my coffin lid. Its face pressed to the viewport slit. Its tongue lashed against the reinforced glass. Its screech vibrated through my skull. Instinct overtook conflict. I raised my power fist and brought it down, once, twice. The third strike splintered it into pulp, and something inside the machine spirit purred, satisfied, content. Then came the third wave, larger, faster, smarter. A carnifex barreled toward me, each footstep cracking stone. A living battering ram, a living tank. Its armored hide glistened with acidic slime. As it charged, for the first time, the machine spirit and I acted together. My assault cannon spun up. The Dreadnought braced. My mind aligned with its targeting arrays, and together we unleashed hell. Hundreds of rounds tore through the carnifex, ripping plates apart, shredding tendons, pulverizing bone. It stumbled, roared, lunged, and I caught it with my power fist mid-charge. Its momentum slammed me back a meter. My stabilizers groaned, stone shattered beneath my heels. I squeezed, bones cracked like dry wheat. Acid blood sprayed across my hull. The beast writhed, then tore in half. Silence, then screams. The swarm hesitated. The tide faltered. Fear rippled through their hive instinct. Behind me, mortal soldiers regained hope. Astarte surged forward in renewed fury. Sisters of battle chanted litanies of fire. I had saved the breach. I had held the line. But as the battlefield roared in victory, inside the sarcophagus, I was losing. The machine spirit pressed against me, triumphant, greedy. See what we can do together? Yield. Let me take control. Let me fight. Let me be free. My thoughts flickered. My will trembled. The Dreadnought was not my prison. It was my rival, a partner I could never trust, a beast I could never allow to dominate me, a shadow waiting to consume the last remnants of who I had been. As the ashes of the carnifex fell around me, I realized something. This machine did not want to protect the chapter. It did not want to preserve a hero. It did not want to defend humanity. It only wanted war. And if I ever faltered, if I ever grew weak, if I ever surrendered even for a moment, the machine spirit would erase me and wear my voice like a mask. I do not dream. At least, I shouldn't. The Tech Marines insist that the sarcophagus's neurocoffin suppresses REM cycles. They swear the sedation circuits keep my mind in a half-death between thought and reaction. They claim that what flickers through my brain are just memory echoes, harmless, accidental, byproducts of neural cleansing protocols. But they are wrong. I know they are wrong. Because last night, if night even means anything in the pulsing dark of my existence, I remembered something I should not be capable of remembering. I remembered pain before the coffin closed. And pain before the coffin is the worst kind of pain. It is the pain you feel while still believing you are alive. It began with a flicker in my memory lattice, a small, static hum behind the eyes that I no longer possess, a vibration along the inner sarcophagus walls, soft at first, like knuckles gently tapping from the outside. But then it grew wetter, a slow, moist scrape. Fingernails, teeth, bone. Something trying to claw its way in, or out. It always starts that way, whispering, "Remain calm," the machine spirit whispered in its language of metal breath. Whispering, "Contain your mind." But I could not contain it. The memory forced itself through the cracks of the sedation field with the hunger of a beast long denied. Suddenly I was falling again, burning again, dying again. I felt my spine snap all over. My rib cage collapse like brittle parchment. My organs rupture under the pressure of a tyrannid's talon. I felt the battlefield mud inside my open chest cavity. I felt the weight of my own blood drowning what was left of my lungs. It was not a memory. It was a reliving. I heard myself, the version of me that was still flesh, screaming somewhere just outside the sarcophagus, begging for a mercy that never came. Screaming, "End it." Gasping, "End me. I can't. I can't." I remember hands lifting me, too gentle to be Marines, too desperate to be apothecaries. I remember the whine of a grav stretcher, the blur of red-robed tech priests, their incense washing over me like a false promise. I remember knowing, truly knowing, that I was being saved only so I could suffer longer. Then the scene shifted. It always shifts. Now I was lying before the golden sarcophagus, naked, broken, skin peeled, bones visible, half of my face gone, replaced by tubes. I saw myself from above, as though I hovered like a ghost over my own ruin. But I was not a ghost. I was a prisoner watching my execution. The Tech Marines chanted Benharic prayers, praising the machine god for the gift they were about to give me. Their voices layered over one another in ascending mechanical harmony. The air trembled with their hymns, and then the lid opened. The sarcophagus swallowed my vision. There was no throne of honor inside it, no glory, no comfort, no dignity, just iron, spikes, restraint bolts, and the stench of antiseptic rot, a coffin pretending to be a savior. I wanted to turn away, but the memory forced my eyes, yes, my still living eyes, to remain open. I saw fabricators adjust saws. I saw servo arms preparing to amputate my limbs fully. I saw the feeding tubes, the waste drains, the nerve spike needles coated in oily anesthetic that never truly numbs anything. I saw the skeletal frame that would devour my soul and call it duty. The Tech Marine leaned close. Not the machine, not the armor, the man beneath, his eyes tired with ritual and necessity. "Softly, you will serve the Emperor forever," he told me softly, "even if you beg him not to." Then the saws lowered. The pain was incandescent. Every nerve ending ignited and atomized. I felt my limbs torn away. I felt my spine fused into the coffin's metal teeth. I felt my last organic sensations slip away like sand falling through grasping fingers. I felt my humanity dim. I heard my own voice break, screaming, "No, please, stop, stop!" Entropy swallowed the sound, and that was when I woke. Not to the real world, not to peace, but to the presence. It stood where my memory had been, a silhouette of liquid shadow, a humanoid shape where no shape should exist. Not a daemon, not a machine spirit, not a hallucination, something else, something ancient, something that lives in the cracks between memory and existence. It had no face, only a shifting mask of red static. But it had a voice. Oh, Emperor, preserve me. A voice like a choir of every dead Marine I fought beside, whispering in perfect unison. Whispering in unison, "You remember because I allow you to remember." I tried to fight. I roared my rejection into the sarcophagus, straining metal against metal. The Dreadnought frame trembled. Warning runes spat amber light. Sedation needles stabbed deeper, yet the presence remained. Whispering, "You are not ready to forget," it said, "nor ready to understand." Bellowing, "Understand what? Angry, what are you? What do you want?" It stepped closer. The temperature inside the sarcophagus plummeted. The machine spirit curled back like a terrified animal. My remaining organic flesh spasmed and writhed. Whispering, chillingly, I am what forms in the void between who you were, it whispered, and what you have become. My breath caught, a useless reflex from lungs that had not drawn air in centuries. You, I swallowed static, are inside me. The presence laughed gently, chuckled softly. No, you invited me. A memory that was not mine flashed across my mind. A battlefield, a dying soldier, a whispered prayer not to the Emperor, but to anyone who could save him. I already knew the truth before it spoke. Softly. When you lay dying, it said, you asked for life at any cost. Protesting. No, I protested. I prayed to the Emperor. Calmly, you prayed to survive. The shadow leaned in until its face was pressed against the inside of my mind. Whispering, and I answered. The sarcophagus groaned. My neural links spasmed. My thoughts buckled under the weight of it. Growling, defiant. You are lying, I growled, forcing defiance through the storm. I was saved by my brothers. Quiet joy. Your brothers delivered you to the machine, it said with quiet joy. But I delivered you to eternity. My anger faltered. Confused, why? Why show me this now? Purring. Because eternity is long, it purred, and you are beginning to forget what suffering tastes like. I felt something cold curl around my memories, not to erase them, but to keep them alive, sharp, bleeding. Chillingly, you will remember every second of your death, it said, every moment of your entombment, every scream you swallowed, every agony you endured. Desperate. Why? The question tore out of me. Whispering, so that when you meet me again, it whispered, you will not mistake me for an enemy. Then it vanished. No light, no sound, just absence. The memory collapsed, leaving me alone inside the sarcophagus, drenched in phantom pain, shuddering as much as the metal would allow. For a long time I said nothing. Silence filled every crack of my being. Then the machine spirit returned, timid as a child. Timidly, pilot, are you functional? I did not answer. Instead, I whispered to myself, or maybe to the shadow listening from the dark corners of my mind. Whispering, I did not survive the battlefield. I finally understood. Whispering, I made a deal with something that crawled in when I was dying. And now I am beginning to understand why my memories never fade, why I still feel pain, why I still dream, because something else dreams inside me, something that remembers the moment I beg to live, something that intends to collect. They say a Dreadnought's first awakening is a ceremony, a ritual, a moment of honor. But the truth no chapter ever records, is that a newly entombed warrior is not awakened. He is dragged back into consciousness like a corpse pulled from a frozen lake. There is no glory in that moment. Only screaming. I remember it clearly now, though the tech marines told me I would forget. The sedatives had not yet taken full hold. My mind flickered between dying flesh and new metal. My soul thrashed like a wounded animal, caught between two worlds. Then came the ignition sequence. A rumble, a vibration, a rising heat behind my skull. The sensation of 1,000 metallic tendrils sinking deeper into what remained of my spinal cord. The machine spirit whispered its first word into me. Move. And I did. My first movement as a dreadnought was a spasm, a horrid, jerking convulsion that made the servo arms around me recoil in alarm. The sarcophagus clamps groaned. The iron coffin shuddered with me. Somewhere outside, a tech marine cursed. It's resisting. Of course I was resisting. I was being reborn into a nightmare. Then the blast doors of the reclamation chamber opened. A wave of cold air struck my metal hull. The chamber lights dimmed as the ancient reactor diverted power to my frame. I felt heavy, impossibly heavy, as if gravity itself had doubled. The Tech Marine's voices echoed around me. Stabilize neural link. Engage locomotion protocols. Prepare him for war. I tried to speak. I didn't know yet that dreadnoughts don't speak. They echo, they thunder. Their voice is just modulation through the sarcophagus, shaped by whatever remains of their vocal cords, if anything remains at all. What came out of me was not speech. It was a roar, a deep, distorted bellow that shook dust from the ceiling, and it terrified me. Because it did not sound like my voice. It sounded like something wearing my soul. They marched me to the lift rack like a chained beast. Servo clamps guided my staggering steps. Every motion was painful, not physically, but mentally, as if my consciousness was too small for the vast coffin body around it. My steps echoed like thunder. Boom, boom, boom. I was still learning how to move when the alarms began to wail. Xenos incursion! Outer gate breached! All battle-ready units to deployment docks! Tech Marines turned sharply. Incense burners clattered to the ground. Red-robed priests began sprinting. My lift cage jolted, rising toward the launch bay. A calm monotone chimed through the Vox. Dreadnought Entombed Brother designated for immediate combat deployment. Immediate. My first war as a machine was not a ceremony. It was an emergency. The presence inside me, that shadowed thing from my memories, stirred with slow, pleased interest. You will learn, it purred. You will kill again. The lift cage slammed open into blinding light. The deployment hangar stretched before me like the inside of a titanic cathedral designed for titans, not men. Walls hundreds of meters tall, chains the size of tree trunks, rows of waiting war machines, thunderhawks roaring overhead, and on the central steel gantry, my brothers, not tech marines, not serfs, space marines, full companies assembling, helmets locking on, bolters mag-clamping, sergeants reciting litanies, chaplains bellowing war hymns that vibrated the air. For a moment, a sliver of a heartbeat, I felt pride, recognition, belonging. Then the first of them turned toward me. I saw the hesitation behind his lenses, the pity, the horror, the discomfort of seeing someone they once knew, now transformed into a walking tomb. Honored brother, he saluted, voice strained. We welcome you. It should have comforted me. It didn't. Because the phrase wasn't for me. It was for the machine, the metal, the coffin, not the soul screaming inside it. I lumbered forward, each step shaking the deck plates. When I reached the strike force, the chaplain raised his crozius and intoned, Awakened ancient, your wrath shall lead us. Lead. Lead. I didn't even know how to turn without nearly collapsing, but the command was already traveling through my neural links. Pre-scripted aggression protocols, movement maps, enemy silhouettes, target priorities, all flooding into me at once. I felt my awareness fracture, not breaking, but multiplying, forced to process data streams no human mind was ever meant to endure. Heat signatures, enemy pheromones, topography models, trajectory calculations, machine spirit hunger, pain echoes, psychic residue, telemetry. My thoughts drowned under the tidal wave. And then the Thunderhawk doors opened. The battlefield outside was hell, a wasteland of burning trenches, ruined fortifications, screaming winds full of ash, the stench of chemicals and flesh. And in the distance, like a swarm of nightmares given shape, Tyranids crawling across the horizon in endless numbers. I felt the machine spirit inside me howl with rage. It surged into my arms, my legs, my cannons. It guided my gaze toward the oncoming swarm with instinctual hatred. My sarcophagus vibrated. My claws snapped open. My heavy flamer spun to life with a demonic whine. My assault cannon cycled. The presence inside my mind whispered, "Go on, show them what you have become." Then the ramp hit the ground, and everything became fire. My first step onto the battlefield cracked stone. My second crushed a Tyranid gaunt like an insect under a boot. I did not think. I did not strategize. I simply acted. The machine spirit fed me targets faster than I could resist. My assault cannon tore into the swarm, ripping limbs and chitin into powder. Every shot thumped through my sarcophagus like a hammer blow. Every kill released a metallic growl from my vox emitters. Marines surged around me, a tide of ceramite and holy fury. But I was not among them. I was above them. Taller, heavier, louder, more terrifying. I watched one of my former brothers fall beneath a warrior's talons. Instinct, or perhaps the presence, took control. I seized the beast with my power fist and crushed it into a smear of bone and ichor. A cheer erupted across the Vox. "The Ancient protects us!" Protects. Yes, that was the lie they needed, but not the truth. Because as I fought, something happened that no one sees, no one hears, no one speaks of. The sarcophagus wept. Not fluid, not blood, not oil, but memories. My memories. They leaked through the neural links like a broken dam. My death, my begging, my mutilation. The shadowed entity whispering promises. And with every trigger pull, every pulverized enemy, every step that shook the planet's soil, I felt myself slip further away. Further from humanity. Further from identity. Further into the metal. At one point, a Marine lieutenant voxed, "Ancient, your fury is unmatched." But inside the coffin, I whispered back, "It isn't me." He couldn't hear. No one could. They only heard the monstrous roar that replaced my true voice. The roar of something that was no longer a man. Hours passed, or minutes, or centuries. Time distorts in the coffin. War becomes a continuous scream, and when the last Tyranid fell, when the battlefield fell silent, when the sky returned to its sickly gray stillness, I finally stopped. Smoke drifted from my cannons. Chitin dripped from my claws. The ground around me was mangled beyond recognition. Bodies, Ozinos and human, lay broken where my wrath had passed. The Marines gathered. They saluted. They spoke words of honor. But I barely heard them, because the presence returned, and it whispered with satisfaction. "Now you understand. Death was the end of your suffering, but war is the beginning." The machine spirit purred in agreement, and in that moment, I realized a truth even more horrifying than my entombment. I was not piloting the Dreadnought. I was being carried by it, dragged along for the ride. A passenger of my own corpse metal. A mind shackled to a monster that would never let me rest. And this was only the first war, the first test, the first taste, a prelude to an eternity of killing. There is a secret every Dreadnought learns after their first battle. You do not power down. You fall, like a warrior collapsing into unconsciousness, except you do not sleep. You descend. After the Tyranid engagement, they transported my battered coffin form back into the fortress monastery. My brothers marched beside me in reverent silence, but all I could hear was the static roar of the machine spirit, still hungry, still vibrating with battle lust. When the clamps finally seized my limbs and the power feeds dimmed, I felt the terrible weight of stillness settle over me. And then, the descent began. Darkness. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that presses against your mind like a hand trying to smother you. At first, I thought I had simply been deactivated, that this was the quiet limbo of a machine stored between wars. I was wrong. Something moved in the dark with me. Something ancient. Something that had been waiting. I sensed it like a shadow behind my consciousness. Not alive, but not dead. Not a demon, but something close enough to make my soul recoil. The machine spirit, unmasked, unfiltered, unrestricted. Without the noise of war to distract me, I saw it clearly for the first time. A presence made of static and memory, a predator crafted from metal and hatred, an echo of every warrior ever entombed before me, a patchwork soul made from the fragments of the dead. It reached for me in the void and whispered, "We share this tomb." My breath caught, or whatever remnant of breath my ruined lungs could simulate. I tried to retreat, but there was nowhere to go. The sarcophagus was not a chamber. It was a mind, a layered mind, a labyrinth of old neural pathways burned into the machine by centuries of pilots before me. I felt their echoes, their screams buried in the iron, their memories fossilized in the circuitry. The spirit whispered again, "You will join them." And I realized, with a coldness deeper than the void, that dreadnoughts do not sleep. They dream, and their dreams are made of the dead. Images slammed into me. Not visions, intrusions, a battlefield I never walked, lit by lightning storms, the shadow of an orc war boss taller than a dreadnought, the burning cities of a world that no longer exists, screams through a Vox channel older than my chapter. Each memory flooded me with a jolt of pain so sharp my mind recoiled. "No," I tried to whisper. "No, these are not mine." The spirit disagreed. "These are you," it hissed, voice fragmented, multiplied, layered. "We are one mind, one rage, one prison." I fought it. For what felt like hours or days or millennia, I pushed back against the pressure of its influence. But the sarcophagus is patient. It watched me struggle. It watched me resist. And then it showed me what it truly wanted. My own memories bled into the void. My last breath as flesh. My brother's hand holding mine. The golden light. The voice that said I was chosen. The agony of entombment. The shadow behind the Emperor's glow. The machine spirit drank them eagerly. I felt it latch onto my trauma like a predator drinking blood. "More," it growled, its many voices overlapping. "Give us all of you." And beneath the rage, beneath the static, beneath the ancient hatred, I felt something else. Hunger. Not for the enemy, for identity. The machine spirit consumes every pilot it houses, piece by piece. A slow cannibalism of the soul. A merging, a compression, a suffocation, a joining. I realized then why dreadnoughts speak so slowly when they speak at all. Not because their sarcophagus inhibits them, but because forming a single coherent thought requires dragging the mind back into singularity from a storm of competing memories. The machine spirit whispered, "You will not remain you." And then it began to show me futures. I saw centuries of war, worlds burning, hive cities razed, demons clawing at the sky, chaos marines stalking me like wolves, orcs drowning me beneath a tide of green muscle, tyranids swarming over me so many times my hull lost count of the dents. All of it happened in seconds, and all of it felt real. I roared, thrashing against the iron coffin. The clamps creaked. Warning sigils flickered across my vision. Still the visions came. I saw myself fighting through the rubble of a world whose name no one remembered. I saw my arms replaced with different weapons. I saw new memories that hadn't happened yet. I saw myself die, again and again and again, only to be reawakened for another war. The machine spirit whispered, "This is your eternity." I screamed. The void swallowed the sound whole. At some point, after the visions, after the dreams, after the centuries of imagined slaughter, I heard a distant noise, a distant clank, a metal door sliding, steps echoing in a cathedral-scale chamber, voices filtering in. Is he stable? His neural patterns spiked again. The sarcophagus is agitated. He's dreaming. Dreaming. The word felt obscene now. One voice spoke more loudly than the rest. The chaplain. "Awaken, ancient brother," he intoned. "Your rest is over." Rest. There is no rest. The clamps disengaged with a thunderous crack, and the world rushed back in. Light, sound, weight, consciousness, pain, pressure, war. My eyes, or what served as eyes, flickered open with a blast of golden HUD sigils. My limbs powered up with vibrations that ran through the bones of the fortress. And the machine spirit rose with me. It was stronger now, more present, more entwined, because it had eaten from me in the dark. I tried to speak. My voice boomed out, distorted, metallic, monstrous. Where am I?" The chaplain bowed. "You are where you belong, ancient, on the path of eternal duty." Duty. The lie they carve into the iron. Then he spoke the words that sealed my fate for the next cycle of torment. "War calls again." And inside the sarcophagus, the presence purred with delight. "Good," it whispered. "Let us feed." As they prepared me for deployment, I realized a terrible truth. I was no longer afraid of war. War was the only place where I could be free. No dreams, no memories, no machine spirit whispering in the dark, no drowning in the echoes of past pilots. War was the only place where the screaming stopped. The battlefield was mercy. The coffin was hell. The clamps released me. I walked toward the gunmetal doors leading to the Thunderhawk. Each step echoed like a judge's gavel. Boom, boom, boom! And with each step, I felt the machine spirit merge deeper, hungrier, more eager. The doors opened. Wind howled in. The smell of ozone and blood. The promise of violence. And through it all, through every signal, every tremor, every echo, I heard one final whisper in my mind. Not from the machine. Not from the chaplain. Not from the past. From the shadowed presence behind the Emperor's light. You were not saved, Arcturian. You were preserved. Preserved for what? The answer came like a gunshot. For what comes next? Varek knelt in the dust of the ruined shrine, chest heaving, nails digging into the stone as though trying to anchor himself to the material world. But the world no longer felt material. Everything vibrated, the stones, the wind, even the shadows. The warp pulsed behind reality like a heartbeat sinking deeper into madness. His heartbeat. A cold truth pierced him. It wasn't the warp breaking into him. It was he breaking into the warp. Something inside him snapped with a soundless crack, like a bone shattering in the soul rather than the body. Darkness seeped out of the fissure, thick, hungry, alive. The reality tear the ground beneath Varek quivered. Runes carved by the cultists flared with sudden blinding brilliance, not because of sorcery cast upon him, but because he was activating them. "I did not ask for this," He screamed, but the words dissolved into a metallic echo. His voice no longer belonged to him. A whisper wound around his mind. You asked the moment you survived. Weakness is a prayer. Fear is an offering, and you have offered so much. No, he roared, clutching his skull, smashing his forehead into the ground to block out the voice, to silence the whispering chorus seeping through the crack in his sanity. I refuse. Refuse? Then why does your soul bloom so beautifully? Why does the warp taste you so sweetly? Varric dragged himself backward, but the shadows stretched toward him like tendrils, feeling, stroking, tasting him. His back struck a cracked pillar. The stone bent around him, softening like wax under a flame. Reality had started melting, and he was the heat. The warp's mirror. The shadows formed a mirror of swirling, oily iridescence, and in that mirror something moved. Not him. Not exactly. It was a reflection of what he was becoming. Hunched, elongated, twitching with impulses that were not human. Bones knotted under its skin. Limbs multiplied, then vanished, then multiplied again. Mouths blinked open along its torso, then folded inward like closing wounds. Varric stared, trembling. That's not me. Not yet, the whispers answered. But soon. The reflection's face, if it could be called a face, pressed against the mirror. Its eyes were his eyes, but inverted, pupilless, starving, soaked in terror and hunger. It slammed its hands against the other side of the mirror. The mirror cracked. So did Varric's resistance. A scream tore out of him, not from fear, but from something far worse. Recognition. The unmaking begins. His fingernails loosened, dissolving into black dust. His teeth rattled. Every heartbeat felt like a hammer blow forging a new creature inside him. Varric fell onto all fours. The ground rippled under him like the hide of a living beast. He gagged as something crawled up his throat. He coughed hard, and a thin tendril of pinkish flesh flopped out of his mouth, writhing blindly before disintegrating. He spat, horrified, but the taste in his mouth wasn't blood. It was change. Bone cracked in his arm, then another, then another. His limbs contorted, twisting into shapes no living body should endure. But worse than the pain was the instinct, the creeping satisfaction, the rightness of it. No, I am Varric. I am human. His spine jerked violently and lengthened by an inch, then 2, then 30. His body lifted unnaturally off the ground, suspended by spasming muscle fibers mutating faster than he could breathe. The whispers felt him weakening. Beautiful. Break. Become. The last memory of who he was. Through the agony, a memory surfaced, unbidden, fragile. He saw himself as a child on the agri-fields of Tarracon, running through tall golden grain, laughing, chasing a wooden hoop with his sister, Miria. Her laughter echoed, light, human, innocent. He reached for that memory. His hands passed through it, fingers warping into tendrils of cartilage. Miria's voice became distant. The memory began to rot at the edges, like parchment burning. Wait. Don't go, he whispered. A small hand, Miria's, reached toward him. Varric extended what remained of his hand. Their fingers almost touched. The memory collapsed into black ash. A sound escaped Varric. Not a scream, not a sob, but something broken between the two. Something that no longer belonged to a man. The cultists return. Torchlight flickered at the far end of the shrine. The cultists had regained consciousness. They approached cautiously, forming a circle around the writhing, mutating figure on the floor. One knelt, trembling with awe. He survives the metamorphosis. Another whispered, "The gods favor him." But the eldest cultist, hooded in crimson, shook his head. "No, the gods do not favor him. They are consuming him." The others stared, confused. "Look closer," the old one murmured. Varek lifted his head. His features were still half-human, twisted, bloody, stretched, but enough remained for the cultists to see the horror in his eyes begging for help, for mercy, for death. The oldest cultist stepped back, voice shaking. "He is not ascending. He is unraveling. The soul splinters." Varek's body jerked upright like a puppet yanked by invisible strings. A sound like tearing cloth echoed through the chamber. But it was not cloth. It was his spirit. A fissure ran down the center of his chest, glowing with sickly violet light. Something churned behind it, not organs, not bones, but fragments of soul trying to crawl out, to escape the body that could no longer contain them. The crack widened. His scream rattled the stones. Shadows poured out of him like smoke, each puff whispering a fragment of thought. "Let me out, I don't want this. Make it stop, please, help me, help me, help me." The cultists recoiled, horrified. "This is wrong," one said. "This is sacred," said another. "This is madness," whispered a third. Only the eldest understood. "This," he said softly, "is becoming a chaos spawn." The eyes of the gods. The air thickened. A presence pressed down upon the shrine, vast, terrible, infinite. Not one presence, 4. Something like laughter rustled through the shadows. Something like hunger stirred in the stones. Something like joy hummed in the air. Something like inevitability settled upon Varek's cracking form. The chaos gods did not speak with words, but Varek felt them watching. They saw him the way predators see a wounded animal. He was not a champion, not a chosen, not a demon prince. He was a plaything, a half-melted toy in the hands of 4 cosmic children who delighted in breaking mortals apart. His bones bowed under the force of their attention, bending, twisting, reforming in ways that defied the geometry of sanity. His jaw unhinged, his eyes liquefied, his ribs spread like wings before collapsing inward. He was coming apart. Mind first, body second, soul last. The ritual chamber shuddered with warp turbulence. Then came silence, a horrible, expectant silence. The old cultist whispered, voice trembling, "It is done." Phase 1 of his unmaking. The final moments of self. Varek hung suspended in the air, contorted, half dissolved into a lattice of bone and sinew. He could feel his mind fraying, reality peeling away from him like old paint. But there was still a spark, a tiny, desperate spark. "I am Varek," he choked out. He didn't believe it anymore, but he needed it to be true, for one more heartbeat. He tried to hold on to his name, his memories, his humanity. The warp whispered lovingly, "Let go. Names are for those who remain themselves. You will not." The last shred of him flickered, and part 6 ends with that fragile spark trembling on the edge of extinction, soon to be extinguished forever. The moment the last fragment of Varek's identity flickered, reality changed its posture around him. Not slowly, not gradually, instantly. The air convulsed, the floor barked, the shadows thrashed like living serpents. It was as if the warp, having tasted his weakening soul, had finally decided the meal was tender enough to devour. And devour it did. The breach widens, the warp wound splitting Varek's chest pulsed violently, as though something enormous was trying to wrench itself free from inside him. His limbs elongated with wet, snapping sounds, bones pushing through skin, then dissolving back into steaming strands of warp flesh. The cultists stumbled backward, shielding their faces from the heat radiating off him. The eldest, who alone understood what was happening, dropped to his knees. "Back away," he hissed. "The gods are sculpting." But sculpting was far too gentle a word. The warp did not sculpt. The warp bred. Varek's human shape sagged like melting wax, then jerked taut like a puppet being dragged in 4 different directions at once. The crack in reality, the one only Varek could feel, only Varek could widen, now shimmered behind him, a jagged mouth gnawing the veil. Something pushed through that tear. Not a demon, not a spirit. Just raw, directionless madness forced into shape by the proximity of a dying mortal soul. It gripped Varek from behind like a colossal hand of invisible fire. He screamed, but the scream no longer sounded human. It was layered, dozens of discordant voices shrieking together, some high-pitched, some gurgling, some whispering desperately for death. The warp whispered in harmony. Birth through ruin, birth through breaking, birth through becoming. The ritual of unmaking, the cultists watched in terrified reverence as Varek's spine tore free from his back in serpentine coils, then slithered back under his flesh like a burrowing worm. His head twisted a full circle, snapping, reshaping, jaws splitting ear to ear. Blood mist sprayed the room, but it didn't fall. Instead, the droplets hung in the air like tiny crimson orbs, orbiting the mutating figure as if drawn into some gravitational madness. "Master?" whispered one acolyte, voice trembling. "Is he becoming a demon prince?" The old cultist did not look away from the horror. "No," he said, voice dry. "He is being taken apart for their amusement." "But the gods do not elevate the weak," the old man cut in sharply. "They recycle them." The younger cultists fell silent, because they knew he was right. Varek's mind was not climbing toward apotheosis. It was collapsing into feral chaos. He was no longer a man trying to fight the warp. He was raw meat for the warp. The breeding of limbs. Varek's torso heaved violently, then burst. A spray of luminous ichor splashed across the runes, sizzling where it hit the stone. From the cavity that had been his chest, something sprouted, thin, black, quivering, a limb, then another, then 12 more. Each limb grew rapidly, twitching blindly, slapping against the floor, the walls, even the cultists. One acolyte was struck across the face. A strip of skin tore free like wet paper. He collapsed, screaming. Varek didn't notice. The limbs moved with a frantic, newborn energy, as though they were trying to find purpose, find identity, but none existed. They were the physical expression of madness, seeking form and failing. The old cultist murmured, horrified, "The spawnling limbs. He is entering the 2nd phase." Another acolyte whispered, "Second phase?" The elder nodded slowly. "The phase where the warp breeds him into monstrosity." The war of shapes. Varek's body was no longer a body. It was a battlefield. Bones struck against bones inside him, reshuffling themselves in an endless, futile struggle to form a coherent shape. His face melted into a smooth mask of flesh, then tore itself open again, forming 3 mouths stacked vertically. His legs split lengthwise into writhing ropes of sinew. His left arm multiplied into 4, then fused into one swollen, grotesque limb bursting with muscle tumors. His right arm withered into a skeletal twig. The warp had no plan. That was the cruelty. It changed him not toward a destiny, but toward chaos for its own sake. Varek's eye, one of them, rolled wildly in its socket. He could no longer cry. He had no ducts left. But he remembered the emotion of crying. He felt the ghost of tears he no longer had. That was worse. Far worse. The faces of the unmade. His back swelled, bulged, ripped open. Faces, half-formed, screaming, sobbing, pushed through his skin like flowers growing from poisoned soil. One face was his childhood self. One was his mother. One was a stranger. One was a blank mask. They writhed and shrieked, fragments of whatever Varric had been, or had been near, or had imagined. The old cultist closed his eyes. His memories are being devoured, and spat back out as flesh. The younger followers were weeping now, because the horror was too much, because the gods they worshipped were showing their true indifference. This was no ascension. This was a punishment, a joke, a feeding. The birth of the warp core. Varric collapsed onto the ground, limbs twitching in every direction. For a moment, he looked still, but inside him something churned. A glowing knot of warp energy bulged at the center of his body, a blazing core of mutation, the heartbeat of the transformation. It flared violently. The nearest cultist was vaporized, reduced to a smear of black mist on the wall. Varric's silhouette expanded again, his flesh ballooning outward like a horrific cocoon ready to hatch. One acolyte tried to flee. He got 2 steps before tendrils lashed out of Varric's warped body, whipping around his ankles, dragging him back screaming into the seething mass. The tendrils forced their way into his mouth, his nostrils, his ears. His screams cut off abruptly. The tendrils withdrew. They were coated in something thick, red, and clotted. Varric absorbed it. The old cultist whispered, horrified, "He is feeding. The warp teaches him hunger." The molt. The glow inside Varric intensified. His skin bubbled, blistered, then peeled away in sheets like molten wax. What lay beneath was worse. A glistening, pulsing form of exposed muscle and tendril, crawling with tiny eyes that blinked independently. Razor-sharp bone fragments jutted out at impossible angles. He was becoming a thing without a blueprint, a creature that existed purely because the warp wanted to see what would happen. The molten skin on the floor twitched, then dissolved into a pool of warp slime. And Varric, or the thing he was becoming, grew larger still. The doors of madness open. The psychic pressure inside the shrine spiked. A muffled boom echoed through the stone walls. Dust fell from the ceiling. The warp tier widened behind Varric, now gaping like an enormous mouth. Shapes moved within it, indistinct, shifting, hungry. Not demons, no. Daemons were intentional. These were protoforms, half-born ideas, instincts, impulses, the raw sludge of chaos itself. They pressed forward, eager to merge with Varric's mutating form, to use him, to amplify their own madness, to escape into reality inside him. He was becoming a vessel, a cradle, a breeding ground for unspeakable things. The old cultist whispered, voice cracking, "It is happening. The final stage, the spawning." The last echo of Varric somewhere deep inside the monstrous chrysalis of limbs and mouths and tendrils. A consciousness stirred. Not strong, not coherent, just a whisper. A memory, "I don't want this." It drifted through the boiling madness. "Please, someone, stop me." A tendril burst from his throat, dripping warp ichor. The whisper grew faint. "Help." Then silence. Varric's humanity finally snapped. His soul cracked in half. The warp flooded in, and the transformation surged toward its final monstrous climax. There comes a moment in every warp-born atrocity when creation and destruction blur, when a thing is no longer changing but becoming. The shrine had reached that moment. The air sagged under the weight of unreality. Symbols carved into the walls twisted into new meanings. candles elongated into spiraling wax stalks that bent toward the center of the room as though worshipping the abomination forming there. And in the middle of it all, the cocoon of flesh and ichor that had once been Varric trembled like a beating heart. Only it was no longer beating for him. It beat for the warp. The cocoon swells. The chrysalis pulsed again. A deep, thunderous throb that rattled stone and cracked the floor. Each pulse sent tremors through the shrine. The walls strain moaned, like the building itself wanted to flee. The old cultist dropped to one knee, sweat beading on his brow. "It is almost complete," he whispered. "Stand firm. Witness the birth." None of the younger cultists stood firm. Most had fallen back, scrambling against the far wall, their eyes wide with a fear too primal for thought. Some sobbed openly. One clawed at his own cheeks, whispering over and over, "I didn't come here for this. I didn't come here for this." But the warp did not care for their regret. The cocoon split, not with a clean tear, but with a gurgling, sucking sound as luminous black ichor spilled onto the floor, hissing like acid. The ichor slithered along the ground, devouring anything organic it touched. One cultist's foot brushed it. His leg dissolved up to the knee in a heartbeat. He didn't even scream. His mind broke before his nerves did. He collapsed in a silent heap. The chrysalis tore further. Something massive shifted inside. Something breathing, something eager, something starving. The eye opens, an enormous, singular eye pushed outward from the rip in the cocoon. Lidless, bloodshot, glassy, it swiveled in every direction, searching for form, for meaning, for prey. When it locked onto the cultists, they screamed. The eye dilated. A beam of psychic pressure shot out, invisible but crushing. Two acolytes collapsed instantly, their bodies flattening as though an invisible titan had stepped on them. Blood sprayed from their eyes, noses, and ears. The old cultist covered his face, head bowed. "Magnificent," he whispered through trembling lips. "Terrible, but magnificent." The eye blinked sideways, a reptilian, alien motion, before sinking back into the mutating mass. The thing inside was choosing its features. It was not choosing sanity. The emergence. The chrysalis convulsed violently, then burst. The explosion of warp flesh and blood knocked the cultists to the floor. The old man alone remained upright, though his face was spattered with black ichor that burned through his robes. From the wreckage, a shape heaved itself upright. No, not a shape. Shapes, plural, limbs sprouted, then dissolved. Mouths opened on its torso, then stitched themselves shut. A ridge of bone grew along its back, splitting into spines, then melting into tendrils. The creature was not forming a body, it was testing ones. The warp wanted to see what fit. Varric, the thought of Varric, was long gone. The monster flopped forward, using 3 limbs on one side, 2 on the other, dragging its warped bulk across the floor, leaving trails of sizzling ichor. Its skin was translucent in places, showing organs that pulsed with unnatural colors. Violet heartbeats, green veins, white-hot sacs throbbing with mutagenic fluids. The old cultist whispered, almost reverent, "A perfect chaos spawn." As if in answer, the creature's head unfolded, 4 mandibles splitting apart to reveal a gaping maw that stretched far too wide, studded with bone shards that passed for teeth. It screamed. The sound was not a roar, not a howl. It was a layered, discordant shriek made from dozens of voices echoing at once. The stolen memories of every being Varric had ever known, rearranged into an orgy of suffering. Half of the acolytes fainted, The other half clawed at their ears, blood pouring between their fingers. The old cultist only smiled wider. The first hunger. Something changed in the spawn. The moment the last echo of its birthing shriek faded, it stilled. Its many, many eyes swiveled toward the surviving cultists. Hunger. Hunger greater than instinct. Hunger older than biology. Warp hunger. The kind that devours souls, not flesh. The creature charged. Its body didn't move like something that obeyed natural physics. It lurched forward, then sideways, then backward all at once, trailing after-images of itself, each one screaming in a slightly delayed echo. A cultist tried to run. He made it 2 steps. A tendril wrapped around his torso, lifting him into the air. His scream filled the shrine until the tendril squeezed and he burst like a rotten fruit. His remains splattered across the floor, sizzling. Another cultist swung a ceremonial dagger in desperate futility. The blade cut into the creature's limb. For a moment, the limb split. But instead of bleeding, it opened into a new mouth that clamped over the man's entire head, crushing it like clay. The others fled. The spawn followed. It didn't move in a straight line. It zigzagged, jittered, phased, appearing in one place then another, as though it couldn't decide which reality to inhabit. The fleeing cultists died in moments. One was impaled through the spine by a bone spike. One was swallowed whole by a maw that opened in the creature's side. One simply vanished when the spawn brushed against him, sucked directly into the warp. Soon, only one man was left alive. The old cultist. The old cultist's choice. He did not flee. He did not fight. He knelt. My gods, you honor me. The creature loomed over him, dripping with the dismembered remains of its creators, its largest head bent low, mandibles clicking. The old man whispered, I have served you all my life. Allow me to serve in death. The spawn regarded him with a cluster of twitching eyes. It did not understand words or devotion or sacrifice. It understood hunger. The old man closed his eyes. There was a wet snap. The creature bit him in half. Not cleanly, not mercifully. It chewed, slowly, as though tasting. Even after the man was gone, the creature continued chewing, grinding his bones to dust, savoring the last warmth of a human soul as it slipped into the warp to be digested. Then it turned. The shrine door stood open. Beyond it lay a corridor, a facility, a world. And the warp-spawned horror that had once been Varric stepped out for the first time into the cold air of reality. Its limbs clicked, its eyes widened, its mouth split into a dozen mouths. It smelled life, so much to devour, so much to break, so much to unmake. The hunger was infinite, the world was infinite. The warp whispered through its bones, go, feed, spread, break, and with a wet, convulsing lunge, the spawn began its first hunt. The first thing the creature noticed as it stepped out of the shrine was the vibration in the air. A deep, steady hum, machinery, generators, ventilation ducts, power coils, an entire facility thrumming like a mechanical heartbeat. To human ears, it would have been background noise. To the creature, it was a map of prey. Every tremor, every breath, every footfall. It could feel it all. The corridor ahead stretched into darkness, but that darkness did not deter it. Warp light flickered behind its many eyes, twisting every shadow into luminous shapes only it could perceive. It crouched low, too low for its unnatural swollen frame, and sniffed. A scent, sweat, fear, humanity. The hunt had begun. The first corridor. The lights in the corridor flickered when the creature moved, as if unsure whether to illuminate something so blatantly wrong. Each step it took warped the metal floor, not with force, but with presence, like gravity itself bent around the monstrosity. And then it heard them. Voices, 3 humans, adult males, 2 armed. Their muffled conversation drifted through a sealed blast door. A normal predator would have charged the door. The spawn simply phased through it. Its bulk shimmered, twisted, and with a nauseating sound like wet cloth ripping, it slid through the metal as though the door were a malfunctioning hologram. The humans inside froze. One dropped his data slate. Another reached for his pistol. The third whispered, "Emperor, protect us." The creature landed in the room with a soft, organic thump, as if something huge and wet had been dropped from a height. Its limbs rearranged themselves for better balance. Bone spines stretched, tendrils writhed, eyes focused. The human screamed. The creature lunged. The first man didn't even get a shot off. A tendril whipped across his face, splitting his skull in a single, effortless motion. His corpse fell without a sound, one half sliding off the other. The second man fired wildly. Bolts ricocheted off the metal walls, one grazing the creature before being devoured by its skin, absorbed into its mass like a sinking stone into tar. It responded by grabbing him with a spined limb and folding him in half. Not breaking. Folding. His ribs snapped with a crack so loud, the remaining man wet himself. The survivor dropped to his knees, shaking uncontrollably, eyes locked on the warped god thing slaughtering his comrades. Please, please don't, The creature tilted its head. The mouth on its chest peeled open, revealing layers of teeth rotating like grinding gears. It placed one tendril gently on the man's forehead and pulled, just his soul. His body slumped. His eyes turned glassy. His spirit shrieked unheard as the creature devoured something far more precious than flesh. The spawn shivered with pleasure. It wanted more. The laboratory. The smell of blood drew attention. Within minutes, klaxons blared across the entire complex. Red lights, mechanical warnings, emergency doors slamming shut. But physical barriers meant nothing to the creature. It simply phased again, melting into the metal, sliding between molecules, reappearing on the other side. It emerged inside a huge laboratory. Tech priests and adepts scrambled in panic. Some fled, some prayed. Some frantically sealed containment cages that had never been meant to hold warp-spawned horrors. One senior magos with a skull-faced servo mask tried to reason with the impossible. "You are an anomaly. Stand down. Let us—" A tendril pierced his throat. Another reached inside his ribcage, not to remove organs, but to rearrange them. Bones twisted, tissue rewrote itself. The mago screamed as his body became a half-melted sculpture of agony. The machine spirit of the lab screamed too, lights bursting in a staccato frenzy. The creature moved deeper, attracted by higher concentrations of life. Servitors lumbered toward it. A devastator turret unfolded. Automated defenses activated. The spawn merely blinked. The turret's ammo belt jammed. The servitors froze mid-step, limbs twitching. The security doors locked themselves open, despite warnings flashing across their runes. The machine spirits feared it more than they obeyed their masters. The adepts finally broke discipline and ran. Some tripped, some shrieked. One tried to hide behind a cogitator bank. The creature found him easily. It dragged him out gently, almost tenderly, by his leg. Then it bit him in half. The internal hunt. The deeper it moved, the more the facility panicked. Automated announcements echoed overhead. Greater than biohazard breach. Level Omega lockdown initiated. All personnel evacuate immediately. The monster paused. Evacuate? That meant more prey outside. It followed the scent of mass human movement. Hundreds of terrified personnel fleeing toward cross tunnels, elevators, and transport hangars. The walls trembled as the facility began sealing sections. Hydraulic barriers slammed down. Bulkheads vibrated shut. Whole hallways collapsed into blast-proof compartments. The creature passed through all of them like mist. The mess hall slaughter. Dozens hid inside a canteen reinforced with ceramite plating. They barricaded the doors with tables, food carts, even dead bodies. Someone chanted litanies. Someone sobbed. Someone tried to write a final message to their family. The creature appeared inside the room. No entry, no noise. It was just there. People froze mid-sentence. The monster took 2 steps forward, its flesh dripping, its limbs mutating with every movement. The panic broke instantly. Some tried to push through the far door. Some hurled objects in desperation. Some curled into fetal positions. One woman, shaking violently, whispered, Why are you doing this?" The creature answered, not with words, with the memories it had stolen. The woman suddenly heard her mother's voice, her brother's laughter, the first song she ever loved, a prayer she whispered as a child. Then the monster devoured those memories from her mind, leaving her hollow-eyed and empty. She dropped dead without a mark on her body. The rest died the old-fashioned way, bones cracking, flesh tearing, gunfire swallowed by psychic pressure, screams turning into gurgles. The carnage lasted less than a minute. The outer gate. The creature now stood before the final barrier, a 12-meter-thick adamantium blast door leading to the outside world. Through the metal, it sensed thousands of people fleeing across the desert plateau. Civilians, troopers, researchers, enforcers, priests, all of them terrified, all of them prey. Behind the gate, heavy tanks rolled into position to defend the evacuation. A basilisk, 2 chimeras, dozens of guardsmen aiming laser guns at the sealed entry point. They believed they were ready. They were not. The creature pressed its limbs against the adamantium. It didn't push. It didn't cut. It infested. Corruption seeped into the metal, warping its atomic structure, rewriting the purity seals, unraveling the machine spirit like a thread pulled from a tapestry. The adamantium door melted like wax. A guardsman stared, jaw hanging open. My God! The creature stepped through. It looked at the assembled defenders. The tanks aimed. The commanders shouted. Laser guns charged. The creature opened its many mouths and laughed. The slaughter field. The tanks fired first. Shells detonated across the creature's torso, sending globs of warp flesh across the dust and shrapnel, ricocheting in every direction. The monster barely noticed. It advanced. The guardsmen panicked. Some fired blindly. Some fled. Some vomited from psychic pressure. One started praying, but the words melted into nonsense under the warp's influence. The creature hit the line like an avalanche. A chimera flipped onto its side with a single swipe. Guardsmen exploded into red mist. Dozens were dragged screaming into the creature's shifting guts. A basilisk round detonated directly beneath it. The spawn flew into the air, limbs flailing, then landed unharmed, its body reforming mid-fall, bones knitting, tendrils thickening. The battlefield fell silent. The remaining survivors backed away slowly, weapons shaking. The creature raised its bulk over them and descended. The hunt is only beginning when the creature finally paused. The battlefield was a sea of corpses, some intact, some half-melted, some missing entirely, soul and all. The creature turned toward the distant horizon. Cities, settlements, millions of souls. The warp whispered its hunger. Go, feed, spread, break. The chaos spawn flexed its many limbs, spines stretching toward the sky. It took its first step toward the unsuspecting world. And the ground shook beneath it. Something else was coming. Something much stronger. Something far more dangerous. Something designed specifically to kill horrors like it. The creature turned as dust rose on the horizon. Massive footsteps. Armor like a walking catacomb. A machine spirit roaring with righteous fury. A dreadnought. You. And thus the confrontation began. I once believed the worst pain a space marine could endure was the moment of entombment. The surgical shredding, the ritual drilling, the suffocating insertion into the sarcophagus where flesh is reduced to a trembling husk and all sensation becomes weaponized agony. I was wrong. That pain ends. But what comes after does not. I speak now from a place beyond identity, beyond humanity, beyond the boundary where thought collapses under centuries of unbroken consciousness. The Imperium believes a dreadnought sleeps between wars. They believe we rest. They believe we dream in silence. No, we do not sleep. We do not dream. We only endure. For the first time in 831 years, the tech priests did not mute the neural feedback before sealing my sarcophagus. They did not do this out of malice. No, they did it out of reverence. Reverence is more dangerous than hatred. It kills slower, but with a cleaner blade. They wanted me aware. They wanted me conscious. They wanted me to hear the litany of blessings with all senses flayed open to their holy noise. You cannot imagine what it means to feel sacred sound directly in your skull. As they tightened my sarcophagus clamps, the final seals pressurizing around what remains of my body, the canticles of activation reverberated through the metal. Every syllable hit with the force of a hammer, forging new echoes into my mind. The sound was so bright, so sharp, that I felt my thoughts fracturing into splinters. Each splinter screamed, "Forged in death, rise in duty. By iron, by oath, by blood that remains. The warrior endures." Their chants were a cage. Perhaps they intended it to be. Custodians may guard the emperor's body, but tech priests, they guard his machines, and they guard us like relics, ancient, fragile, precious, too precious to allow the mercy of oblivion. As the final seal locked in place, I felt the last gasp of air leave my lungs. My biological functions were secondary. They always have been. Tubes pumped nutrients, drained waste. Augmetics did the rest. My body was no longer mine. It was a puppet trembling beneath a sarcophagus designed for war. But my mind? That remained alive. Too alive. The sarcophagus walls trembled as the machine's spirit connected. The link is supposed to be instant, clean, clear, absolute. But old Castriferum patterns do not link. They invade. They push into you like a second mind clawing for dominance. The union of man and machine is not a harmony. It is a struggle, a constant battle for control. As the machine spirit awakened, I felt its hunger spreading through me. It wanted motion. It wanted heat. It wanted to feel the recoil of its guns, the trembling of earth beneath its feet, the rush of battle fury flooding its circuits. It wanted war. It always wants war. But there was none. Not yet. And so it turned its hunger inward. Its thoughts seeped into mine like oil dissolving water. Symbols, impulses, sensory predictions, all mixing into a single blinding river of purpose. I fought to retain the concept of self. I lost. For a moment. Imagine drowning inside your own skull, the machine spirit pressing into every crevice of your identity. Imagine your memories flickering like candles in a hurricane. Imagine the sensation of your childhood, your training, your battles, your oaths, all slipping away as something enormous and ancient tries to overwrite them. This is the truth of every dreadnought. To be entombed is not to live inside a machine. It is to share it. A second consciousness sits with you, stares at you, judges you, and the older the machine, the stronger its will. My Castraferum sarcophagus is older than most stars visible from Holy Terra's skies. Its memories are battlefields long vanished, wars long forgotten, warriors long dust. It remembers them all, and it remembers losing them. The machine spirit does not like losing. As its presence expanded inside my mind, it began showing me memories that were not mine. I saw battles fought 10,000 years ago, the siege of Yarek's Gate, the purge of Thranis Delta, the steaming jungles of a world whose name has been erased by time. I saw titans fall, heroes die, cities burn to the bone. I felt the tremor of ancient cannons, the heat of plasma storms, the weight of 1,000 broken oaths. None of these were my memories, but the machine spirit forced them into me until I could no longer tell where its pain ended and mine began. And then it whispered, not in words, in impulses, in demands. Move, fight, kill, destroy, make them remember us. I cannot scream inside the sarcophagus, but my mind screamed for me. I resisted. I pushed back. I invoked every vow, every prayer, every fragment of identity I still possessed. I reminded the machine spirit who I was. Brother Arcturian, 7th Company, bearer of the burning vow. It did not care. It only cared that I was alive and therefore capable of being used. That was when the strangest thing happened. The machine spirit paused. A silence deeper than void space swallowed my thoughts. The spirit recoiled, not in fear, but in confusion. It sensed something it had never sensed in me before. Weakness. Centuries of battles had drained me. Millennia of waking consciousness had worn me thin. Buried trauma had hollowed my resolve. And the machine spirit saw the cracks. Cracks it could widen, cracks it could fill. Something in the deep metal around me shifted, and for a moment, a terrible, miraculous moment, I felt the machine spirit reaching not for my memories, but for my soul. It wanted to replace me, to take full control, to pilot the dreadnought without flesh interfering. A dreadnought piloted by its own machine spirit is a heresy of the highest order, a crime against the omnissiah, a danger to all life around it. And yet, I understood why it wanted this. Because we are the same. I too want release. I too want the silence of oblivion. I too want an end to this endless waking nightmare. And so for the first time in my 8 centuries of service, I considered allowing it. I considered surrendering. I considered letting the machine spirit rise through me like dawn through fog and take everything that was once human. But then, a sound, a single distant sound, not a chant, not a machine, not a servo, not a priest, a voice. Brother Arcturian, can you hear me? It was a child. No, not a child, a neophyte. A young recruit barely upgraded, still smelling of fresh gene seed implantation. The softness in his voice was not innocence, it was fear. He stood before my dormant shell, speaking softly into my external vox grill. I've read your records, he whispered. You were a hero, the kind they say we should become. I felt the machine spirit recoil from the voice. Something about weakness repelled it. I want to be like you someday, he said, but I don't want to end up like you. Silence expanded. It was the first honest thing anyone had said to me in centuries. And in that moment, I remembered myself. The machine spirit roared in frustration as I seized control again. It slammed against my mind, but my will, bolstered by a single terrified neophyte's whispered confession, held firm. I rose, not in body, not in metal, but in spirit. I reasserted dominance. The machine spirit howled, but it obeyed. It obeyed me. And in the darkness of my sarcophagus, I understood the true horror of my existence. I do not want to die anymore, because if I die, the machine spirit will take my place. That is the final cruelty of a dreadnought's life. We pray for death until the moment we realize someone else is waiting to steal it from us. And so I endure. Not out of honor, not out of duty, not out of glory, but because the moment I let go, the machine spirit will live a twisted parody of my existence, wearing my memories like a skin suit. So I remain, locked in eternal battle, not on the field, but inside my own skull. There is no victory, only survival. And survival, I have learned, is the real punishment.